Buenas noches, es el 1 de julio del 2016. Mi nombre es Matthew Ogden y usted nos acompaña para nuestra videoconferencia semanal de los viernes aquí en LaRouchePAC.com. Como pueden ver, me acompaña aquí en el estudio mi colega Benjamin Denniston y por video dos miembros del comité político de LaRouchePAC, Bill Roberts de Detroit, Michigan, y Michael Steger, que nos acompaña desde San Francisco, California. Tenemos una videoconferencia muy importante y especial esta noche donde presentaremos un adelanto de video corto que les dará una visión general de la conferencia, la muy importante e histórica conferencia que acaba de concluir el fin de semana pasado en Berlín, Alemania, patrocinado por el Instituto Schiller. Como prefacio a ese video que nos va a dar el material para una discusión posterior esta noche, quiero decir nada más que no pudo haber venido en un mejor momento esta conferencia. Está claro que existe una desintegración absoluta del sistema del transatlántico que estamos viviendo ahora mismo. Esta no es nada más una desintegración económica o financiera, sino que es una desintegración, de hecho, de todo el sistema en su totalidad. Es una desintegración política, es una desintegración social, es una desintegración intelectual de los axiomas que han formado la base, el fundamento de ese sistema fallido. Los axiomas que subyacen el sistema del transatlántico han fracasado. Está en bancarrota en todos los sentidos de la palabra, no solamente financieramente, sino también políticamente, culturalmente, intelectualmente. Y la única solución a eso es reemplazar ese sistema fallido con un nuevo paradigma totalmente nuevo. Esto es exactamente lo que el señor LaRouche dijo cuando pudimos hablar con él ampliamente ayer. Los que están en esta videoconferencia hoy, todos participamos en esa discusión. Lo que dijo el señor LaRouche es que no hay manera en que este sistema del transatlántico puede sobrevivir. Eso no quiere decir que no es una situación muy peligrosa y que podrían haber consecuencias terribles si se desatara una guerra o si salieran de control otras cosas. Pero lo que se está haciendo bajo estas circunstancias por parte del liderato de este llamado sistema financiero del transatlántico es un bluff completo. No va a funcionar, dijo el señor LaRouche. Estamos enfrentando, dijo, una situación muy seria, un colapso muy serio, del tipo que la humanidad no está muy preparada para poder resolver. Esto es muy claro. A la vez que vemos un desplome de todos los mercados financieros en el sistema transatlántico, tenemos una escalada en lo belicoso y lo agresivo de la postura de Obama y sus colegas respecto a Rusia y China. Obama estuvo ayer en Ottawa, en Canadá, en la cumbre de Norteamérica, donde estuvo presionando a los canadienses, diciéndoles que tenían que participar de manera mucho más prominente en combatir a la llamada agresión rusa, prestando sus tropas para el despliegue de la OTAN. Y el Consejo del Atlántico quiere ahora que este despliegue de la OTAN se vuelva algo permanente en las fronteras de Rusia. Y Rusia ha sido muy claro. Shoigu, el ministro de Defensa de Rusia, ha dicho que la OTAN ya ha duplicado el despliegue en las fronteras de Rusia. Y esto ya es antes de la cumbre de la OTAN, que va a ocurrir en Varsovia. Y podemos esperar que ese despliegue aumentará significativamente. Ahora, lo que dijo el señor LaRouche cuando estuvimos discutiendo esto con él ayer es que se puede ver que todos los llamados líderes de este sistema, todos los líderes están en bancarrota. El liderato mismo está en quiebra en tanto institución. No es que ellos tienen un problema, sino que ellos son el problema. Son fraudes, dijo, y nosotros, de hecho, somos los únicos líderes disponibles en la escena mundial. Lo que dijo la señora LaRouche, y de nuevo esto es después de las experiencias como la principal organizadora y quien dio el discurso magistral de esta importante conferencia, que vamos a ver unos extractos en un momento. Ella dijo, miren, esto no pudo haber ocurrido en mejor momento. Esto fue literalmente 2 días después del voto de Brexit. Y lo de Brexit es simplemente paradigmático de la crisis de desintegración total. Hay caos total, desintegración que está saliendo, se está desintegrando todo el liderato del Reino Unido. Todos los principales partidos políticos son como pandillas de lobos que se están matando los unos a los otros. Y es muy posible que Escocia e Irlanda ambos salgan del Reino Unido, haciendo que Gran Bretaña se vuelva una Bretaña menor o una Bretaña muy pequeña. Dijo la señora LaRouche, no sabemos hacia dónde va, pero está muy claro que la conferencia ocurrió en el mejor de los momentos, porque lo que se presentó y lo que van a ver en esta visión global somera que les presentaremos es que no pueden haber soluciones por pedacitos. Es demasiado tarde, es demasiado pequeño. No se puede resolver este problema aquí, un problema allá y tratar de armarlo de esa manera. Lo único que va a funcionar es un paradigma totalmente nuevo que reemplace la manera errónea de pensar con principios totalmente nuevos. Dijo ella, una nueva era de la civilización, y si no se hace el salto, dijo, simplemente no vamos a salvarnos. Dicho eso, me gustaría presentarles una visión general breve de la conferencia que ocurrió en Berlín. Y esto es para alentarlos a que vean toda la conferencia que estará disponible en forma de video dentro de poco. Helga Zepp-LaRouche. Creo que todos hemos venido a esta conferencia porque todo el mundo que está en esta sala sabe que estamos viviendo una crisis existencial, sistémica, sin precedente de toda la civilización. Hay la coincidencia del peligro de guerra, donde la OTAN está enfrentando a Rusia de una manera muy, muy agresiva, que podría conducir a una tercera guerra mundial. Tenemos una confrontación de Estados Unidos en contra de China en el mar del sur de China. Existe el peligro de una nueva crisis financiera tipo 2008 que podría hacer estallar todo el sistema financiero. Y, claro, hace 2 días tuvimos el Brexit. Gran Bretaña votó para salirse de la Unión Europea. Y como todos sabemos, esto no fue un voto en contra de Europa como tal, sino que fue un voto en contra de un sistema totalmente injusto y en contra de una élite corrupta. La conferencia tiene un tema, o un tema que subsume lo demás, y eso es definir soluciones a estas crisis para discutir cuál debe ser el nuevo paradigma y si la humanidad es capaz o no de resolver tal crisis existencial. Tenemos ponentes muy distinguidos de 4 continentes, de muchos países. Estas personas obviamente son gente representativa del tipo de personas que están comprometidos con la idea de que se encuentre una solución. Y antes de entrar a una discusión de estos peligros mortales, la solución es fácil. Así es que siéntanse con calma, presten atención. Si la humanidad se une para instrumentar un buen plan y actúa con solidaridad y con valor, cualquier crisis de la civilización humana se puede resolver, porque es a la naturaleza del ser humano que cuando estamos desafiados por un gran mal, se desata una mayor fuerza del bien para despertar nuestras almas. Habla el embajador Charles Freeman. Helga, le quiero dar las gracias por esa discusión tan inspiradora. Hemos entrado en un mundo en que, como dijo William Butler Yeats en 1919, todas las cosas se están desintegrando, el centro no se mantiene, la anarquía se ha desatado en el mundo. En Europa, en las Américas, en partes de Asia hay un sentido de algo malo que va a ocurrir. Hay malestar de lo que va a ocurrir. Estamos flotando simplemente con un parálisis político. Hay demagogas que está ascendiendo y el olor putrefacto del fascismo está en el aire. Este es el contexto en que China ha propuesto integrar todo el continente eurasiático en una red de ferrocarriles, carreteras, gasoductos, oleoductos, sistemas de telecomunicaciones, ferrocarriles, aeropuertos, desarrollo industrial. Si una franja, una ruta de China se realiza, abrirá un área muy amplia al intercambio económico intercultural, reduciendo las barreras a la cooperación en una zona de 65 países con 70% de la población mundial, 40% del PIB, que genera más de la mitad del desarrollo económico mundial. En su concepto, el programa de una ruta, una franja, que es uno de los temas principales de esta conferencia, es la serie de proyectos de ingeniería más grande que jamás el hombre ha realizado. Su potencial para transformar la economía y política mundial es proporcional a su escala. Habla el coronel francés Alain Courbet. Quiero felicitar al Instituto Schiller por organizar esta conferencia en un momento decisivo, cuando la amenaza de una guerra nuclear que podría conducir a la extinción de la humanidad se vuelve más y más claro todos los días por la concentración en el centro de Europa de armas capaces de destruir al planeta en cuestión de segundos. Para responder al reforzamiento de las fuerzas estratégicas de Estados Unidos y la OTAN en territorio europeo, Rusia se ha visto forzado a desplegar un arsenal equivalente en sus fronteras occidentales. Por lo tanto, es momento de que los estrategas de varios países exijan más sabiduría y calma de los jefes de Estado del mundo entero. Este es el propósito de este instituto benéfico fundado por la señora Helga Zepp-LaRouche, que quiero felicitar personalmente. Habla Jacques Cheminade, candidato presidencial francés. Entonces, el pensamiento de LaRouche procede del devenir. Es una ciencia que está en el principio activo de la economía. El sistema transatlántico, el sistema financiero en el que estamos viviendo, se basa en una acumulación de dinero, está conduciendo a lo opuesto. No el aumento del tamaño de la economía física, sino al caos y a la guerra, o más precisamente y más trágicamente a una combinación de las dos. Los ponentes previos han mostrado que el sistema mundial actual es más peligroso, sí, más peligroso que jamás fue en los peores momentos de la Guerra Fría. Quienes se proclaman realistas y razonables al seguir las reglas del juego y del sistema en realidad contribuyen al desplome por el mero hecho de que operan dentro del sistema sin combatir ese sistema. Ahora hemos llegado al momento de la historia donde el cambio sistémico, un cambio justo de la economía y del hombre, son necesarios para la supervivencia de todos. El dinero no tiene valor intrínseco, no es sino un instrumento y tiene valor únicamente por lo que promueve. De ahí en adelante, ¿cuál es la meta que hay que alcanzar? Habla Lyndon LaRouche. Primero que nada, estamos hablando del tema del hombre como tal, la capacidad del hombre de crear niveles superiores de desarrollo de los poderes humanos de la humanidad. Lo siguiente es, ¿cómo entendemos? ¿Cómo encontramos cosas que van a lograr que la humanidad siga existiendo más exitosamente? Y esa es otra pregunta. Todas estas cosas son cuestiones científicas simples. De lo que dependemos es impulsar lo que llamamos la ciencia física e impulsarlo per cápita a un nivel siempre superior. Ahora, en ese proceso se tiene que definir lo que son los medios para lograr esto que acabamos de presentar. Mi preocupación siempre es encontrar una nueva tecnología, una tecnología más avanzada, una que puede reemplazar y hace que las tecnologías existentes ya no sean necesarias. Mi especialidad es concentrarme en la revolución en tecnologías aplicables. Y esa es la única manera que yo conozco para que la humanidad pueda mejorar los requerimientos para la humanidad ahora. Habla Marco Sani, jefe de la delegación M5S de Italia en el Parlamento Europeo. El sistema financiero europeo se está desplomando por políticas malas por parte de los gobiernos europeos y la Unión Europea. Claramente un primer paso, y lo hemos propuesto en un proyecto de ley en el Parlamento italiano y uno en el Parlamento Europeo, en el marco de la reforma de la estructura bancaria, es restablecer la separación bancaria. Creemos que tenemos que establecer un tipo de Glass-Steagall moderno europeo que simplificará la regulación del sistema bancario y que hará que la separación entre la parte central de un sistema bancario y, por otro lado, la parte especulativa, para establecer un sistema bancario que ya no se enfoca en la especulación en el sistema financiero, sino en los requerimientos de la economía real de la gente. Y este es el primer paso. El embajador Leónidas Chrysantopoulos de Grecia. Otra amenaza que enfrenta la humanidad es la animosidad de Estados Unidos en contra de Rusia, como si todavía estuviéramos en la Guerra Fría. Esto ya se habló en el panel previo, pero lo quiero mencionar de nuevo. El sistema misilístico se está estableciendo para rodear a Rusia y, por supuesto, Moscú va a responder. El embargo económico de la Unión Europea en contra de Rusia después de la crisis de Ucrania tampoco ayuda, como tampoco las amenazas de Obama en contra de China, con la idea de limitar su poderío económico. Con una Unión Europea que se desploma y un Estados Unidos que busca confrontación con Rusia y China, una solución para la humanidad puede ser la iniciativa de los BRICS, que es la iniciativa de Brasil, Rusia, India, China y Sudáfrica, para seguir una política de desarrollo económico para beneficio de la humanidad. Han creado su propio banco de desarrollo para invertir en los proyectos de desarrollo necesarios. China ha establecido el Banco de Inversión en Infraestructura en Asia, con 20 países asiáticos como miembros fundadores para establecer un fondo de desarrollo de la Ruta de la Seda. Habla el embajador Hamid Siddiq, actual embajador de Afganistán en Alemania. Quiero expresar mi gratitud y que me siento honrado por participar en esta conferencia tan importante. En los últimos 30 años, el Instituto Schiller ha jugado un papel significativo en la promoción y discusión internacional de temas importantes para conformar el futuro de nuestro trabajo. Desde los tiempos antiguos, una ruta de la seda ha sido un símbolo importante como arteria comercial para conectar a Asia y Europa en beneficio de todas las naciones involucradas en esta área. Nuestra conferencia hoy, y espero construir en base a esta antigua tradición, juntando a los científicos y políticos para desarrollar una nueva ruta de la seda y empezar el proceso de integrar y regenerar en esta importante región, el centro de Asia. Ahora, nuestra visión es crear una vida segura y pacífica para nuestra región, que le permitirá a miles de refugiados que regresen a sus casas y para reconstruir sus comunidades de nuevo. Habla Bereket Simón, presidente del Banco Comercial de Etiopía y asesor al primer ministro. Me gustaría expresar mi simpatía y apoyo al pueblo de Siria, Irak, Libia y toda la región del Oriente Medio y Norte de África, que han sido sujetos a la destrucción como resultado de una política equivocada de cambio de régimen por parte de algunas potencias planetarias. Quiero también darle las gracias al Instituto Schiller por invitarme a hablar sobre un tema importante del momento, la importancia del desarrollo económico de Etiopía en el contexto de la nueva ruta de la seda y la región africana más amplia. Queridos amigos, Etiopía considera el proyecto de la nueva ruta de la seda de China y la ruta marítima, conocido como una franja, una ruta, como una nueva oportunidad para contribuir a mantener el desarrollo económico junto con todos los países de la región. Pensamos que en la última década o dos hemos visto el resurgimiento del comercio entre África y el Oriente, y la nueva ruta de la seda sería un respaldo para estas naciones. Esto se aplicaría a la relación entre Etiopía y sus socios tradicionales. Junto con nuestros vecinos en la región, estamos comprometidos a que Etiopía y África logren un nuevo renacimiento con las nuevas posibilidades que abre la nueva ruta de la seda. Les doy las gracias. Habla el embajador Michel Rambaud de Francia. Buenos días, quiero hablarles a ustedes de Siria. Y mi ponencia se llama En Siria y otros lados, en contra del partido de la guerra y la ley de la selva, tenemos que reconstruir la paz y el derecho internacional. Estos son mis temas. Primero, antes que nada, el mundo hoy está en gran peligro de la guerra más que nunca antes. Está pasando por una crisis global. Uno escucha mucho sobre una nueva guerra fría, que sería una nueva confrontación entre el llamado mundo libre, el llamado eje del bien, y el bloque totalitario que se conoce como el eje del mal, como lo dijo George Bush. Tenemos que inmediatamente eliminar las sanciones. Este es mi mensaje, se tiene que eliminar las sanciones. Es un crimen de guerra, es un crimen fundamental de la guerra. Esto se tiene que eliminar de inmediato y tenemos que pelear por esto. Mensaje de Fuad al-Ghafari de Yemen. Querida señora Helga Zepp-LaRouche y presidenta del Instituto Schiller y estimado Hussein Askari, el coordinador para el Oriente Medio del Instituto Schiller, señores y señoras reunidos en esta conferencia en Berlín hoy, les envío un gran mensaje de alegría y gratitud a ustedes y a su equipo por lo que hemos logrado en mi país respecto a la conciencia de la nueva ruta de la seda y el puente terrestre mundial y el nuevo sistema económico de los BRICS. Todo esto tiene que ver con lo que ha ocurrido por nuestra oficina asesora con los derechos para distribuir la versión en árabe del informe especial de la IR. La nueva ruta de la seda se vuelve la puente terrestre mundial y hemos impreso 1000 copias para el mercado en Yemen. Habla la doctora Butaina Shaban, asesora del presidente de Siria. Si hemos de crear un mundo para todos, un mundo pacífico, un mundo próspero, tenemos que crear un concepto intelectual de un mundo. Tenemos que crear el concepto de la ruta de la seda. No solamente una ruta de la seda como tal, sino una ruta de la seda intelectual. Todos ustedes saben que Alepo y Siria eran totalmente decisivos en la antigua ruta de la seda que conectó a Asia con Europa. Siria y el pueblo de Siria estarán más que felices también participar activamente en una nueva ruta de la seda, en una ruta de la seda política, social e intelectual que conecte a Asia con Occidente, que conecte a Eurasia con Occidente. Video sobre el proyecto Fénix. No solamente Alepo, sino toda Siria, con su pueblo, cultura y artefactos, representa un testimonio viviente y singular a la coexistencia y la continuidad de civilizaciones humanas diferentes. Es imperativo que el mundo defenda y preserva esto, y que cuando se establezca la paz, hacer de Alepo la capital mundial del diálogo de la civilización. Entonces yo creo que debemos tener conciencia plena que en esta crisis actual existe una tremenda oportunidad para alcanzar un nuevo renacimiento tan significativo, o quizás más, que el cambio que ocurrió entre el medioevo y los tiempos modernos. que si rompemos con los axiomas de la globalización, del pensamiento deductivo, de todas las cosas que han conducido a esta crisis, y si nos enfocamos en la creatividad de la humanidad como aquello que distingue a la humanidad de otras especies, que muchos de nosotros podremos vivir para ver un mundo donde cada niño se le educa universalmente y que la condición normal de la humanidad sea ser genios, que aquello que es humano se desarrolle completamente y plenamente, que tengamos todos los potenciales que tiene la especie humana como compositores creativos, científicos, ingenieros, gente extraordinaria que descubren cosas que ni hoy ni conocemos las preguntas, como por ejemplo China, que va al lado oscuro de la Luna. Hay secretos ahí del universo que ni sabemos qué preguntar todavía. Y creo que la gente se volverá mejor personas, porque la verdadera naturaleza del hombre es ser bueno. Que cada ser humano tiene la capacidad para perfección sin límite y bondad del alma. Y para lograr eso está al alcance. Hay que trabajar por eso.
So as you can see, this was an absolutely extraordinary conference, and on the final screen you saw briefly the website displayed where you can find the full proceedings of the conference. It's newparadigm.schillerinstitute.com, and although that was a tour de force of incredible speakers of a really incredible caliber, that was not even all of the speakers who were present. So we encourage you to go to the website and watch all of the presentations in full. And you know, Mrs. LaRouche was emphatic in saying after the fact that this was an absolute breakthrough in terms of the activity of the LaRouche movement, the types of people, the caliber of people who were there. This was not just an analysis or talking about issues or the problems of the planet, but it could be seen very clearly that we are the center of organizing the solution, organizing the change in paradigm. One of the other things that was a major feature of this conference, which we just couldn't include in that overview, was a outstanding classical music concert that was organized on the evening of the conference. This included a Russian children's choir singing Russian songs. It included a string orchestra based out of London that plays professionally at the lower Verdi tuning, A432. It included a performance of Chinese folk songs and other classical music, and then a grand finale performance of the Mozart Coronation Mass by the Greater European Schiller Institute Chorus, joined by other choruses from around Berlin. So this is an absolute breakthrough, and as Mrs. LaRouche said, the conceptions which lie at the heart of the solutions to the crisis were there, and this was representative of the leadership of the world. And I think that's what we have to offer in this moment of danger and uncertainty. So I think we can open up a discussion from there. It's a hard act to follow, I'm sure, but
well, I think the point that Helga made that you just referenced, Matt, on this question of shaping policy, I mean, what you see, I think, increasingly now, not only in Eurasia, but what we saw with the participation at the conference, which significant participation in Europe, high-level participation from the United States, you see an increasing desire to look at the fact that this current system, even the New York Times had the intellectual ability to recognize that this post-World War II system, the system set up by Churchill, by the FBI, this Wall Street system, since Franklin Roosevelt's death, is essentially now coming to an end. That's what the Brexit references. The conference as a whole was in the context of the Brexit vote. But it's not simply a vote to leave the European Union. This is a reaction by an increasing majority in the transatlantic, within the population, which recognizes that the system is dying, it's dead, that there's no longer a future or life to the current system they're living in, whether that's Great Britain, whether it's the United States, where you see the major populist revolts here. And this was discussed by many of the speakers, and many of them didn't expect it to occur. And yet, when you're on the ground and when you're organizing the population, when you have increasing suicide rates, increasing drug overdoses, increasing levels of unemployment, it's not hard to figure out when talking to the population that a new system of value, it's a financial system, but it's a policy. It's a long-term policy for the development of mankind that has to be reconjured, redeveloped in the minds of the population. And I think that's what's so essential about the conference is Helga's entire intent with this conference, and why Lynn's participation was so important, was because it provokes in the quality of discussion a new conception of where mankind must go or what mankind must become. And that really is the essential nature, because at this point, this transatlantic system has no longer any life. It's almost like a breaking, it's fracturing. Each break leads to more breaks. The question is, what's the new whole? What's the new conception of mankind in the transatlantic and for the world? And I think we have a lot of work to do, but clearly there's the most open situation politically we've ever seen.
Yeah, I would just add that I think for an American audience, the thing really to take away from this whole process is that clearly what we're seeing in terms of the process of development of the new Silk Road, and in terms of the beauty of the idea, which I think people, as they have a chance to experience the cultural panel, the musical process from this conference, will really geopolitics is irrepressible at this point, and what that means is that there's no turning back. There are no half measures or piecemeal measures to do anything of a halfway nature at this point. And I would say that this includes that it should really be very obvious to the American population that this current election process is a complete and utter sham. I mean, a process, a so-called democratic election process, where you have a couple of candidates, but there's absolutely no discussion of the ridiculous war crimes of the last 15 years of administrations in the United States. I mean, even in Britain now, you have Jeremy Corbyn, who is threatening to bring war crimes tribunal, should he come into government, against Tony Blair. The Blair crowd is shaking in their boots, and you can see that there's a complete and total situation of weakness of this entire British empire at this moment. And because this is really unclear in the minds of the American people, and because it's, I think, very unclear how close it is that we are, to thermonuclear war, how, aggressively the threat of thermonuclear warheads are being used against China and Russia, that the ignorance to that is the most dangerous thing we could, that's what's most contributing to the danger facing this planet right now. So I think the sort of the one pathway or one tool clearly within the United States that expresses that level of an abrupt shift against geopolitics in particular is what is now the motion around the 28 pages to expose the role of the British and the Saudis, in the cover-up of that process. And Senator Bob Graham has made the point in a recent interview with the Daily Beast that it's very clear now that the 2-month period that the Obama administration gave him assurances of that they would review the pending release of the 28 pages. Well, that's come and passed now, and it's clear the intent is to simply keep this thing in the dark and continue the war push, continue the desperate war push. And I'll just mention, one more thing. They're also now, the Obama administration is completely pushing a lie and undercounting vastly the number of people innocent civilians that they calculate have been killed in drone strikes throughout the countries that we're not at war with. I mean, it should really just hit people, the contrast between the beauty of this process of a world beyond geopolitics in the unconscionable war crimes and the acceptance of the legitimacy of a process which completely covers over and overlooks, the tremendous war crimes, of these recent two administrations. So I think that should be a real immediate wake-up call that we do have to, as Americans, break out of this current paradigm.
Well, what Helga began the discussion with, which I think shaped the entire quality of all of the panels, was the statement, which is a very profound statement, that in the face of great evil, mankind is capable of finding within himself great good. And I think that you were witnessing that in all of the speakers. The spirit that was moving all of these speakers is one that this system can no longer be allowed to continue. It has reached the point where it is too horrible to contemplate the logical outcome of following through with the continuation of the values that underlie this system as a whole. And we see it breaking itself down all around us. None of these events that have occurred are somehow causal of the breakdown of the system. They are merely symptomatic. They are paradigmatic. The Brexit is paradigmatic. Everything that you see in terms of what Michael was citing about the depression and the demoralization and the despair in the populations in both the United States and within Europe. This is symptomatic of a system that is in dire need of dramatic change. And the good news is that change, the wind is blowing in from the east. You have a new system which has come to life based on proposals that Lyndon and Helga LaRouche laid out in their seed form 30 or 40 years ago. It's now taken the form of the official policy of the most populous country in the world. You have the official public integration between the New Silk Road and the Eurasian Economic Union. This is explicitly based on a return to the values that Franklin Roosevelt envisioned would dominate the world following World War II. However, were supplanted by some very, very evil and destructive forces. And now you have the New Silk Road. You have the opportunity for an entirely new paradigm. As Helga LaRouche says repeatedly, and as she said at that conference, it would be so easy. This is not some daunting, never-ending, distant dream of some sort of new system which is a fantasy. This is very real, it's very present, and it's something that on the turn of a dime, an overnight decision by a handful of leaders comprised of many of the people who you saw speaking at that conference and the circles that they represent, a decision overnight to enter this new paradigm and to drop some of the failed values that have led us down this path to danger and destruction would be sufficient to bring Europe, to bring the United States, to bring the Western world into harmony with a new paradigm which is already emerging. Not that anything is perfect, but that there is a directionality, there's an impulse towards the perfection of man, towards the increase of the productive powers of the human race, towards the greater good of the human species, which is guiding us or pulling us into the future. And if we're willing to listen to that voice, the voice from the future, we can save man at this critical juncture in our history.
I think it really goes to the issue of the power of ideas in this whole process, because I think, Helga made the very emphatic point that this was a major breakthrough conference in, if people are familiar with the Schiller Institute, it's, much of its activity is centered around a series of these international conferences. And you go back to the mid-90s, and the conferences we were involved in, Helga was involved in then, in the launching of the whole Eurasian land bridge perspective, when it was just an idea, it was just a conception, it was a right idea, it was true, it was on principle, and Lynn and Helga fought for that conception, and now you see it coming to fruition. So I think this whole process, I think, is useful for people, especially, people who watch too much TV in the United States and you're just immersed in the insanity of the United States, to get a sense of what's actually real, what's actually powerful, what matters in history. It's not the crap you see thrown around, that this culture is inundated with. That is a passing breeze in history that's going to come and go. What matters is your truthful commitment to principles, to true ideas. And I think Helga's concluding remark about looking at where we're at from this much longer historical perspective and saying we need a new shift in our very recognition of what mankind is. We need to look to things like the Golden Renaissance and look at mankind in the medieval ages and the Dark Ages and compare that to what mankind became after the Renaissance. It's a complete transformation in the human species, what I think Lynn was intervening with in some of the discussions, that we have to recognize that character of continual complete revolution in the very nature of our existence is human. And so you're looking at a moment like this, and just it really emphasizes the self-breakdown of this transatlantic system, this self-feeding breakdown process. I think a tangent, people talk about the Brexit and like what maneuvering they're doing, why they decide to do that, why they're panicking. They don't know what they're responding to crises that are being created by the breakdown process itself. This is not something that's in control. So in that, complete disintegration, it's these conceptions, these ideas, this gathering people of this caliber for this international discussion around what does mankind really need to be doing as mankind on this planet. Can we finally reach the point where we actually unite nations around a real conception of what is a universal, unifying, truthful principle about humanity, about what makes our species unique and different than anything else we see on this planet. That's us, that's mankind. We can have that as a common goal, that's as a common unifying factor, and that's emerging now. So I think, for people inundated with just the degeneracy of the political process, the cultural process, I think, this stands out as a reference point that people can use to lift their mind out of the gutter of popular opinion and into history and see what's actually happening right now.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that people will have noticed from that overview video that you have the opportunity to watch is that there was a very significant involvement from leadership within Syria, right in the war zone, including government advisor, Her Excellency, the advisor that you saw speaking, which was a live video hookup directly from Damascus. And she engaged in a dialogue process with the attendees of that conference, which was very significant. And Helga LaRouche said that panel, which was an entire panel on the reconstruction of Syria, what happens after we bring peace? How can we bring peace to this region, a region which is a crossroads of civilization, was a crossroads of the old Silk Road, is a crossroads between three continents. She raised the fact that President Assad, prior to the outbreak of the fighting, had proposed an idea called the 5 Seas strategy. And when you look at the 5 oceans, the Red Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, and the Persian Gulf, you have Syria situated right in the middle of those. So it's not only a crossroads of the Silk Road as a land route from Asia to Europe to Africa, but it's also a crossroads of the maritime Silk Road and the connections between these 5 seas. There was a video presented which was prepared prior to the conference called Project Phoenix, which is a vision for the reconstruction of Syria. And there was other dialogue at the conference from very high-level persons from within cultural circles and also government circles within Syria. So Helga was emphatic to say, you know, this panel on the reconstruction of Syria was certainly a highlight of the conference, and I think it was just exemplary of the fact that the Schiller Institute really is the go-to body in terms of these people who are desperate for a solution, desperate for a future for their countries, and they know who has the ideas. They know where to go to get those ideas. So, you know, the combination between the expansion of the New Silk Road, the reconstruction of Syria, there were 3 resolutions that were passed at the conference, one for the immediate end to the sanctions against Russia, another for the immediate end to the sanctions against Syria, and also one against the Saudi bombardment of Yemen, which is ongoing to this day. And you saw a gentleman who sent in a video from Yemen, right from the war zone there. So, you know, I can't emphasize enough, and I think you got a little bit of a flavor during that overview of what this conference, the caliber of this conference was, but I really can't emphasize enough, you know, you need to watch this conference in full. You need to share this. You need to get this around to everybody who you know. As you were saying, Ben, you know, this is a completely different perspective on the world than what you would normally get from your average mainstream media. So just wanted to encourage you again to, as the videos become available, to go to the newparadigm.schillerinstitute.com website.
Just to add to that, I think, Matt, you might have mentioned this at the beginning, but in the discussion with Helga and Lynn yesterday, the reality is that the kind of collapse and the crisis we now are incurring is something beyond anything mankind's experienced up to this point. This is not a collapse of the stock market. It's not a Lehman Brothers financial collapse. You're now seeing the political dissolution. The presidential spokesman for Russia, Peskov, made some comparison to the breakdown of the Soviet Union. But you see that this is even of a greater scale than that kind of collapse. Now, perhaps the world is better prepared for this crisis than it was for the one in 1989, but I would say the world is not prepared sufficiently. And the leadership in the United States and the transatlantic is not prepared sufficiently at all at this point. And the population has to bear some responsibility on this. The question, there's so much emphasis on democracy in the West. Democracy in and of itself is not a principle. As Ben referenced, you know, we need an actual return to a sense of principles, of universal principles, knowable scientific, physical characteristics of the universe to shape our policies. But those principles cannot exist within a small set of people. You can't expect a elite to somehow solve and address the problems we now face. The population as a whole, and this is really why our outreach in the United States to uplift people beyond this presidential fiasco, and to recognize that there is not a preparation. There is not yet a capability to address this problem sufficiently. But what this conference addresses is the level of discussion and level of participation that begins to move it in that direction. And that is an urgent nature, because these events, as we saw last week, are only going to increase in the weeks ahead. Just within the last couple of weeks, you've seen fundamental changes in orientation from Japan towards Russia and China. The new Philippine president, Duterte, made a major motions towards the FDR and Lincoln tradition and a collaborative effort towards China. You've seen major changes even in the last week by Turkey and a rapprochement towards Russia. There are major developments constantly happening which are reshaping the world. But the crisis of a collapse of this transatlantic system is far beyond anything most people have ever imagined. And I think the seriousness and urgency to develop these ideas and participate in this dialogue has never been greater.
I mean, I really think the collapse goes to the heart of this British system. I mean, a lot can be said, you know, but go to Adam Smith, go to the original fundamental cultural assumptions, ideas about the nature of man, the idea of man is governed by pleasure, pain, that mankind is just a species that can respond only to pleasure stimulus, avoid pain stimulus. The whole ideological framework of the British system, which is, you know, increasingly infected and taken over the United States and run the transatlantic system, you know, it goes to those deep issues about what is your understanding of the nature of mankind in the universe. And you go to this, we're seeing the breakdown of this entire British ideological, imperial, cultural system that's dominated really for centuries. I think that is the scale that we're looking at. This is a breakdown of a century-spanning imperial outlook that's had ebbs and flows and increases and decreases of its dominance, but it's now reaching the point of self-inflicted collapse. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so in a certain sense, I mean, Americans, you know, we have a certain tradition in direct opposition to that, clearly, and I think, you know, people should be celebrating that in the next couple of days, and not just hot dogs and fireworks, but actually, you know, use this as an opportunity to get a real rooted sense in what is our mission as Americans in opposition to this imperial ideology, you know, in direct resonance and collaboration with what you're seeing out of Asia right now. You know, this is the time to bring that back.
Right, and it's exactly what you said, you know, to constantly come back and say, what is the ideological failure which is underlying all of the events that you're seeing? The breakdown, the refugees, the disintegration politically, financially, culturally of the European system. And, you know, as Helga emphasized during this conference, it's only a paradigm shift on the level of the change from the Dark Age to the Renaissance will be something which will function at this moment. That didn't just happen. That was not just some sort of organic process of historical materialism, you know, transforming itself. That was a willful change. That was a willful change in the fundamental ideas underlying society and the way that society worked. And it's people who have the ability to self-consciously reflect on the fact that we are facing the failure of a system of thinking, and then to examine what those failed ideas are, and then to say, how do we replace them? How do we discover a new principle and create a fundamental intellectual revolution which will allow mankind to carry itself forward into the future? And I think that's what we witnessed in the proceedings of that conference, but it's, as Michael said, it's something which cannot stay within the confines of that conference and the people who attended it, but it is something which must become an integral part of our national dialogue as a people, and it's our responsibility to bring that about. That's not something that we can sit back and wait for somebody else to do. So I think that's a good Independence Day message.
I mean, people think they are what they experience. They think that's what they are. That's not what you are. People are what they create, or what they fail to create. People are not just your experiences in life. People are what is your new fundamental contribution you're making to human society, or you're failing to make to human society. And until people completely transform their understanding of what they think their lives mean, you know, we're not going to reach the level needed to make this shift, make the transition that was presented, you know, I think very, very clearly this past weekend.
All right, well, I'm going to bring a conclusion to our show at this point, but what you should immediately do is visit the newparadigm.schillerinstitute.com website, and some of the videos are available. I know that Helga Zepp-LaRouche's keynote video is available in full. That's a 30-minute, 35-minute length video. So at least please watch that, and then as the other videos become available, it'll be posted on that website. So bookmark it, make sure that you follow the YouTube channel, and you'll be notified as soon as those videos are made available. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today, and I'd like to thank Bill and Michael for joining us via video, and again, emphasize newparadigm.schillerinstitute.com, and we will have continuing coverage on LaRouchePAC.com as well. So thank you very much. Happy Independence Day, and good night.